Hello and welcome to this UniCourse video. My name is Ashley and I'll be hosting today's session. This session's topic is understanding the management role to improve management performance, and it's based on Unit 400. Now Unit 400 can be used within both levels of the qualifications that we deliver on level 3 and level 5 for the certificate and diploma. So some might complete it at the end of their qualification for the level 3, and some might complete it at a starting point for level 5 qualifications. So what I aim to do in this session today is break down the elements of this unit and be able to give you some hints and tips on how to complete the assignments. Okay, so the starting point for the unit would be to enter Moodle, the unit choice on Unit 400, and open your unit specification. Now this is important for any unit. It's the first thing that you do. Should open the unit specification and break down what the learning outcomes are and what the assessment criteria is. The assessment criteria is obviously the questions that you need to answer in order to complete all of the sufficiency descriptors within the marking sheet. So the assessment criteria on this unit is split into 3 learning outcomes. Firstly, you have learning outcome 1, which is looking at the specific responsibilities of the middle managers and how they are involved in achieving the organisational goals. The second section looks at you understanding how communication and interpersonal skills are necessary and important in order to be able to be a good manager and be able to deliver the objectives in order to meet them organisational goals. The next section looks at reflecting on yourself, on completing an assessment in order to be able to develop yourself as a manager. So there's 3 specific sections here. Now, in the past, I have advised people to have a look at the resources as a whole, using the information pack and the resources within the unit toggle. But if you'd like to, if it is a starting point for you, it might be useful to you to split this into 3 sections when completing the assignment. Now we do have an assignment template that's been broken down with further guidance and subheadings within this unit, as it is often used as a starting point. So that might help you. So it's good practice that when you are starting in this unit to open it up, write your name on it, and that you're getting started then. So when you're looking at the unit specification, it's broken into sections. So you have the title, then you have the level of the unit, the credit value, which you'll have discussed on an initial assessment with myself, when choosing your units and your individual learning plan. And then you'll have the guided learning hours. Now, as mentioned to the learners on the initial assessment and on induction, I will have informed you that the guided learning hours should really, you should disregard them. Everyone learns at different speeds and researches at different levels and writes in different ways, so don't worry at all about the guided learning hours within the specification. Then you have the learning outcomes on the left, and that's what we want you to do, and the assessment criteria is basically the questions. And then you have the unit purpose at the bottom, which is basically the aim of the unit. So the aim of this unit is to develop an understanding of the middle management role to be able to then go about planning your own management development. So the last page on a unit specification is, it's really important and necessary for you to look at. It's based on the learning outcomes, and it's broken down into the indicative content. Now, in order for you to be able to get a good pass, you should be researching all of these areas and including elements of it within the answers within your assignment. Now, we develop the information packs based on the indicative content. We develop tasks and incorporate templates and challenges and questions based on this indicative content to be able to help you to build on your knowledge and understanding within these areas before you tackle the assignment. So it is useful for you to be able to, go away and have a little research on all of these areas, but read the information pack first. So it allows you to understand what research you need to do, and you can see exactly what's expected of you, and you can also be able to think about the logical sequence in order in which you answer the questions as well. So within this assignment, the first element of it is understanding, the management role. Now, a good way to start upon this is to look at organisational structure. So you might have an organisational chart on your website or in your in your employee handbook even. And it's good to be able to have a look and visualise where about you fit within that organisational structure. Now, past learners, that have started this course with tunnel vision. And when I say tunnel vision, I mean based on what they do. So they may have a department on, a marketing department, for example, but they may not fully understand where about the administration department fits within what they do. They might not see the organisation as a whole. And I always think it's good to be able to visualise where about that you fit within that organisational structure and what your purpose is within there in order to be able to achieve the organisation's vision. So think of yourself as a cog within a big machine, and in order for that machine to work efficiently and effectively, you have a part to play. So looking at the different organisational structures is a good way for you to be able to see where about you fit, but also how the organisational structure works well for you in your business. So the function of an organisational structure is to not only allow for you to be able to see the chain of command, but you consider just consider it as the backbone for strategy, for any activities, for communication within the organisation. And I've noted down here that you can look at the power and responsibilities that are assigned and how information flows between the different levels. You can also consider, disciplines and, who's in charge of who and how people have to work alongside who as well. So thinking about that as the function, the structure, there can be many different types of organisational structure depending on the organisation size or, the function of that organisation or the industry in which it works. So an example, a quite an unusual organisational structure that I came across a couple of years ago is we had a learner who worked with United Utilities, and they had two separate structures, one for wastage water and one for clean water. You also have, different types of structure, such as a hierarchical structure, one of the most common actually, and that usually has, a structure and a really good chain of command. But a downside of this is, sometimes you might need, say, like the third or fourth, panel. So you might need the financial director, for example, to approve a an incentive for the operational unit staff at the bottom, and that could take time to funnel up the chain of command before it's approved to come back down. And if you've got a target that needs to be hit by the end of the week or by the end of the month, it can be sometimes quite difficult. Also, when you think of maybe the CEO needs to approve, quality standards, for example, that could take time to happen. So information can get, stuck in between, and, it can cause bottlenecks. But usually the chain of command means that the only person that hasn't got somebody overseeing them is the shareholders or the CEO or the person that's at the top of the hierarchical structure. And this works well for larger organisations. The next structure, a horizontal or a flat structure, is usually useful when companies are starting up, and sometimes it's the case that people keep this structure when the company is expanding, and it should be reviewed as the company is expanding. Is it still working? Is it effective? Do we need to change our organisational structure in order to make it effective? Some of the key points to this is um, it has hardly no levels of management, so it's quite easy to communicate between different departments. It can improve coordination and speed between employees as well, and it can have a positive effect that it elevates the employee's responsibility to allow them to take their own initiative. So, for more innovative thinkers, or for more of a creative workplace, it would work well. So then, once you consider the organisational structure and you're considering the higher level management, you need to then consider strategy. So, how is strategy formed? So, basic idea of strategy is, the organisation will be based on vision and mission statements, and what they are is they're inspiring words that are chosen to convey a strategic direction for that organisation. Now, this vision will then, maybe every 3 years, the senior management will get together and they will decide upon organisational goals. Now, there may be long term goals, there may be short term goals, um, and they could be in relation to profitability, growth, customer service, depending on industry. They can be quite general statements of desired outcomes, basically. And then from the objectives will be, more specific, sorry, from the goals will be more specific objectives. Now, them objectives could be funneled out to department heads or department managers for them then to simplify and set tasks for their departments. So, learning outcome one asks you to define specifically the difference between objectives and goals. And, it's important within this learning outcome for you to be able to provide examples and real work examples within your organisation. So they should both be specific and measurable. So if you're being told by the senior management that you need to, um, increase customer sales within a year, you know that then you need to break that down, because what task needs to be done to do that. So as a manager or a leader, you've got to then think about what tasks you can do to be able to meet that goal. So a really good and popular way of doing that is by using SMART objectives. So making sure that they're specific, the measurable, the achievable, the realistic, and the time bound. And if your objectives are SMART, they're more likely to be completed, and within a timely a timely time frame as well. So Michael E. Douglas, a theorist, came up with this model for writing effective objectives, because some find it difficult to actually create the SMART objectives. And the way he's looked at it is the word to followed by an action verb. So that might be, to market, or to achieve, or to increase, or to send surveys. Um, but then it's followed by a single, specific, and measurable result to be achieved. And then obviously the target date. So I've given you some examples here, but there's plenty as well within the information pack, and there's an ebook as well that will help you with this as well in the resources tab on Moodle. But I've given you an example: to achieve, so that's the action verb, a 6% overall return on the fourth quarter sales. So, the fourth quarter sales is the target date there as well. Or to increase customer feedback by 10% at the end of the year. Now, that is the objective, but to increase customer feedback by 10% at the end of the year, you might be able to break that down further for your team and set them a task to email all existing customers with a survey, and offer them, an incentive to complete that feedback questionnaire. So, you could break it down further into tasks as well. And being able to do that, will help you to be able to meet them objectives as well. So just a small challenge just for you to consider for a second. I want you to look at each of these different objectives that I've basically taken from other people's assignments, and think about whether it's meeting the the criteria for SMART for Michael E. Douglas's model. So think about, you know, is there a single result there? Is it specific enough? Is it measurable? And is there a target date? So just give yourself a second to do that. So hopefully that you will have realised that the first one, there is no target date. So to triple sales of Lexus cars in Europe, if they said that by the end of the year, then that would be a smart target. So the second one, it isn't measurable. There's no measurable outcome for you to be able to achieve that. The third one, it's not specific enough to increase revenue in 2009. That might be a goal, but it's not an objective. Then four will be there's no single result for you to be able to measure it upon. And then the fifth one, it isn't specific enough again to write objectives within 2 weeks about what. So think about how you can make your objectives smart, and think about when you are looking at learning outcome one, how them objectives are working towards meeting them goals. Now, if you want to aim for the good pass on this, you need to be able to show that you can see the link between day-to-day tasks to objectives to goals. So consider if I was working on the marketing team. Let's use the marketing for example again, because most organisations will have some sort of marketing or sales teams. If you were working on the marketing team, and or your marketing supervisor or a leader or a manager, and you think, well, I've just set them a task to update LinkedIn once a week with any promotions for us, how does that lead to the organisational goal? Think about what it connects to, and you might want to speak to a senior level manager to be able to see the strategy. They might have a strategic plan that you might be able to look at. Also with bigger organisations that have really good websites, you might be able to see it on there. So for example, Sainsbury's has a full strategic plan with their goals and objectives, and it clearly links to their organisational values and the vision of the organisation. So you can even just have a look at theirs for an example as well. So the next section of learning outcome 2 looks at communication and interpersonal skills that are necessary for a manager to be able to fulfill their role, to be able to, help and support their team, to be able to complete their tasks, their objectives in order to meet their organisational goals. Now, think about, what can what can get in the way of you being able to perform um, well as a manager, really, and what barriers can stop you from being able to communicate them objectives and be able to meet the outcome. And it might be that it's a physical barrier, such as recently we've had an extension within our office, we've expanded, and we've had some issues with the internet because the Wi-Fi has been getting transferred over, and obviously there's been building work going on, so sound has been a physical barrier as well. So you think about ways that you can overcome, so strategies to overcome them barriers. And that's one of the interpersonal skills that are necessary for a manager: problem solving and being able to think on your feet as well. That's a really good skill to have as a manager. Now think about ways in which you can overcome these barriers. So for example, you might have a couple of people that are working remotely, which is, obviously more common these days. And you might be using Zoom, and technology can be a barrier, but maybe language can be a barrier as well, because people are speaking quickly as they're more comfortable in their own home, and they're working via Zoom or Teams or Skype or whatever they're using. Um, so you might say that barriers to overcome miscommunication might be to ask people to slow down. I mean, I know that's one thing that I should do more often because of my strong accent. So asking people to maybe slow down, and maybe sending an email or writing minutes of the meeting and sending them out with the important points that have been addressed. That could be a different strategy, or it might just be more useful to speak face to face when it's really important meetings. Also thinking about psychological barriers, mental health and people becoming stressed, or even conflict within an organisation. So there's a number of different, barriers that can come up when managing a team. And for this point, one of the main things to clarify is making sure that you're looking at two strategies to overcome that barrier. If you do that, you when you're looking at the marking criteria, you'll see that you need the two dissimilar strategies to overcome that barrier in order to pass this section. So moving back onto the role, obviously overcoming barriers and having good interpersonal skills and, good communication skills is really important. But remembering that, middle managers are usually the busiest in the organisation. They're usually the bridge between senior management and lower level team, and the communication between everyone in the organisation. But they have, a vast amount of responsibilities, and usually the better you are at your job, you probably get given more responsibilities as well. But here's just some of the examples of the responsibilities, looking at resource management, having the right people in the right place at the right time is essential, in order to be efficient and effective in your role and with your team. Troubleshooting as well, and problem solving is a real big point, and enforcing quality, so checking that everything's happening as well as it can be, and training, succession planning as well. So there's a range of different responsibilities, and the role of a middle manager can extend and become become more vast and more bigger, really. But just remembering that you're informing within learning outcome 2 of the responsibilities in order to be able to create a bigger output than the input that's initially put in. So just going over the interpersonal skills that I feel are probably the most important, but you might feel that you have different interpersonal skills that are useful within your industry or your organisation. But mainly active listening is probably one of the key points. And where team working, and making sure that you're questioning to make sure that you get into the root cause of problems in order to be able to solve them problems, and also negotiation, persuasion, influencing, and being able to be empathetic as well, and enforcing and portraying a positive body language is essential as well, and making decisions that people are confident in as well. So having that assertiveness as well is also important within the middle management role. Now, learning outcome 3 is about assessing yourself and your role as a manager, and it's specifically asking about you. So any question that asks for an assessment, you will be required to attach some form of evidence that you have actually assessed something. Now, this asks you to assess yourself. So one of the key points that I ask people to look at is to, complete a self-assessment on yourself. Maybe complete a SWOT analysis, which looks at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities and your threats. But you can also get feedback from others. If you want to go for the good pass, you want to make sure that your assessment is comprehensive. So when I'm saying comprehensive, it's looking at it from a few different angles, okay? So maybe you might use a past appraisal or a review, or you might even look at your, your job description and weigh it up as to where you are and what you're doing as part of your role. The 360-degree questionnaire is a template that's actually on Moodle, and it's a great thing to use. You can get it completed by your manager, your the subordinates, the people that you're leading. You can get it completed by a colleague, and it will give you a full rounded view on yourself basically. And then you can use the feedback and the information that you've gained from the assessment, and be able to think about how you can improve on your performance following from that. So you can then look at adding them into a personal development plan. Now I think we've got 2 or 3 templates on Moodle, but you might already have a continuous development plan, personal development plan. Part of your appraisal might have set KPIs in it with key performance indicators that you need to move forward with. So you might want to add it to that. You might also even want to add it to, if you've said to me on induction, I want to learn a little bit more about performance management, then you might find that your manager has said in your past appraisal or on the 360-degree questionnaire that you could work on more performance management tools and techniques within your team. Then you could add that. Making sure that anything that you do add to a personal development plan is smart. So you're making sure it's specific. You're making sure that it can be measured by maybe a certificate or a completion of a unit, or if you're doing maybe a CPD within the workplace, it might be health and safety at work that you have to complete every year. It might be that you're doing first aid at work that you have to complete every year. I mean, one of my learners in the past actually put a few personal goals on there. One of them was to pass a driving test, so in the future she could go for a job, a promotion where she needed a car to be able to do that. So it just depends on what your goals are, but considering making sure that they are time bound so you can always work towards and that's and making sure that you're monitoring it, and that's what's going to get you the good pass. If you're putting priorities on your personal development plan, and you're putting whether it's a short-term or long-term goal, or whether you're putting an exact date, or if your manager's going to be monitoring that, then they're the type of things that's going to get you the good pass within this section. Moving back to the assessment criteria. Now this is a snippet of the assignment brief. So once you've looked at the unit specification within the toggle of the unit that you're working on, unit 400 in this case, you will then be moving on to looking at your assignment brief and the information pack. Now some people choose to print this marking sheet out and write notes on it and tick off when they've completed certain sections. You can do that, but just making sure that when you've finished your assignment, that when you're proofreading your assignment, that you can then look through and say, well, have I made a clear definition between goals and objectives? If you haven't, or you're not sure, break it down into subheadings, make a table if you'd like to. If it's asking you for 2 specific things, like one point of one of the units asks for the effects on individuals and a group. So you might want to break it down. And remember that on this criteria, it will tell you if it wants 2 for an example of 2 tools or techniques, for example, for a pass, or it might say a range for a good pass. It might say implicit information for a pass, or explicit. Explicit basically means you just want more information. It might ask you for justified recommendations. If it's asking you for that, then you need to be researching areas and proving why that recommendation is justified. If it's asking you for a comprehensive assessment, as I mentioned earlier, not just one assessment, you're going to be looking at it from a couple of different angles. So yeah, make sure you're using this marking criteria before you submit, so you can then confidently submit your assignment. Also bear in mind the number of points that you can get for each unit. So for this one specifically, if you can get 12, then bearing in mind how many words you need to write for that, if it's worth 24 marks, you know that you're going to have to be providing more information. You might need to do a bit of research on theories or models, or something to be able to back up that answer. So always aim for the good pass. Always. So if you do miss out on anything, then you're going to fall into the pass criteria. And that concludes this video. Just a couple of things. If you're doing this as a first or one of your final units, you can always still contact me to break down any questions or to give you some advice if you're on the right tracks. You can also you can also rewatch any of the videos on the playlists. Like there's a video on assignment guidance and meeting the higher grades, which might help you with your assignments as well. And yeah, remember to use the marking criteria. ILM is so transparent in the fact that they let you see this. So mark it yourself before you submit it, and then you can be confident if you've met all the criteria. Thank you for watching today, and that concludes our video on understanding the management role to improve management performance. Thanks.